Okay, everybody, welcome and thank you for joining us here tonight. It is a pleasure to have students, faculty, staff, alumni here, folks who are professionals in and around the justice system and especially within corrections. This kind of panel really represents one of the things that we like to do in our program, which is to educate folks about how to be true professionals within the justice system, and also shine a light on and celebrate folks who have had fantastic careers and have contributed and impacted the justice system in important ways. I want to thank our panelists. We'll do some introductions of them in a moment, but I really want to thank them for devoting their time and energy to this panel and for their contributions to the field that they have made. I also want to thank and introduce Deborah Becker, who needs almost no introduction since she's a household name with you all, but she's been doing important work in journalism around the justice system and critical work that sheds light on the practices that are happening there and helps to lead to reform, and also shines a light on some of the good work that's being done within the field. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Deborah Becker to moderate the panel, and thank you very much. One final note on the back, you will see that there is a QR code for questions. If you scan that, you can enter the number. We'll also take questions from the audience since we don't have too large of a group here that we can't have questions from the audience directly as well. So feel free to type in your questions if you have a question for the panelists, and Deborah will relay those to the audience. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. It's good to see you all here. And it really is, I want to thank the Correctional Reform Working Group that has put together a series of talks about what's happening in corrections. And they've really done enormous work. This is our third one so far, the third one that they've done that they've asked me to moderate. I say our because I feel like it's mine sometimes. But they really are bringing the history of corrections to you from people who have worked in the field. So you hear firsthand how some of the changes have happened and what they'd like to see in the future. So it's really a terrific opportunity for all of you to hear about what's been happening. And we have a great panel tonight, women in corrections, right? It's not always heard of. And these women, these very esteemed women, have had decades-long careers in corrections. So they have lots of stories to tell us. We don't have that much time, but we'll try to get to some of the highlights in their careers and what they think about women being in corrections. And as Shay said, you'll be able to ask questions on Slido. And if that doesn't work for you, the QR code on the back of the program, then raise your hand and I'll try to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask your question of our panelists. So I'm going to introduce them to you first. Dr. Marianne Mestrorilli directs Boston University's prison education program. She has worked in correctional systems in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, holding positions from correction officer to superintendent. So welcome. Also, Jen Gaffney is here, and she's going to be telling us about her 3 decades of experience with the Massachusetts Department of Correction, including serving as deputy commissioner. Among other things, she helped coordinate the response to COVID in state prisons. No easy task. Yeah. And she's also worked in several state correctional facilities and with national corrections organizations. She is now a consultant. Also, Dr. Charlene Bonner is with us, a member of the Massachusetts Parole Board and a designated forensic psychologist. She also has 3 decades of experience diagnosing and treating mental health issues and substance use issues, which we know there are a very high percentage of people who are incarcerated, both in this state and nationally, who have mental health issues and substance use issues. And her focus has been on diagnosing and treating those issues with justice-involved individuals. So thanks for being with us. And last, at the end, is Carole Cafferty. She's worked for more than 35 years in prisons and jails, a former superintendent in the Massachusetts Department of Correction, and she also is director of the Educational Justice Institute at MIT, which she co-founded, and a previous recipient of the Glass Ceiling Award from the Massachusetts Association for Women in Law Enforcement. So let's, before we begin, let's give them a round of applause. So they have lots to tell us about their particular fields. But before we begin, we wanted to bring you an address on video from Pelicia Hall, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Regulatory Officer for ViaPath Technologies. She works with state, local, and federal governments to improve practice nationally. Pelicia was appointed as Mississippi's first female Commissioner of Corrections. She has a law degree and has held several high-profile legal counsel positions. She currently serves as president of the Association of Women Executives in Corrections. So let's hear from Pelicia. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I really hoped I could be there in person with you all, but I couldn't make that work. So I'll try to do the best I can and be personal with you on video. It's truly an honor to be here this evening as we delve into an incredibly important and timely topic: correctional reform, women leadership and impact. This panel of amazing women sitting before us represents more than just a discussion. It's a call to awareness and a celebration of the transformative role women are playing in shaping the future of corrections, and what a timely conversation to be doing such during Women's History Month. I was going to give you the benefit of my background, but I think that's already been given enough. But I just have to say that I had an opportunity to serve as the Commissioner of Corrections in the state of Mississippi, and it was an amazing experience. It was quite challenging, to say the least, but it was an amazing experience, having an opportunity to try to transform the state's correctional system, but to do so from the heart and mind of a woman in that leadership role, and the first having been able to do so. So again, amazing challenge, and I wish I was there to talk to you more about it, but maybe on round 2 when you have another one of these events. So when I think about today's discussion, and when we talk about leadership in any profession, it is often defined by 2 things: the ability to inspire change and the capacity to leave a lasting impact. In the field of corrections, where the stakes are high and the mission is deeply intertwined with justice, rehabilitation, and public safety, these attributes are not optional, they are essential. And yet, when women step into leadership roles in this field, we see these qualities take on unique forms, accompanied by both extraordinary contributions and profound challenges. This brings me to the heart of what I want to highlight for you today, what is important about women in leadership roles and what unique things we see nationally in terms of their contributions, but also their challenges. But before diving deeper into that part of my opening address, I'd like to take a moment to weave in my personal commitment to these efforts. As it was mentioned, I am the president of the Association of Women Executives. And as the president in this role, I have had the privilege of working alongside some of the most dynamic, forward-thinking women leaders in the field. Our association exists not only to empower women in corrections leadership, but to amplify their voices, to support their growth, and to bring visibility to their remarkable contributions. For me, this work is more than a professional commitment. It's a personal passion rooted in the belief that when women lead, systems transform. Or if they say, if you want to get anything done, put a woman in the role and we'll get it done. Our mission within the association is grounded in the understanding that leadership is a shared journey. Through mentorship programs, collaboration opportunities, and advocacy efforts, we strive to elevate women in corrections at all levels. The work we do is a testament to the unique perspectives women bring, perspectives that inspire inclusivity, drive innovation, and prioritize rehabilitation alongside justice. Just today, AWEC hosted its Thursday speaking series. We do this every month. But we hosted our Thursday speaker series where Dr. Tamara Lynn gave a presentation on inclusive leadership and being visible in sometimes an invisible space, especially for women. At the national level, there are clear themes that demonstrate why women in leadership are indispensable in corrections. For one, women leaders excel in redefining what effective leadership looks like. Traditional notions of authority and command are being replaced by models that prioritize listening, understanding, and consensus building. This shift is particularly significant in corrections where the human element, whether it's staff, incarcerated individuals, or communities, is central to success. Another thing that resonates with me is advocacy for systemic reform. Women leaders have been instrumental in addressing disparities within the correction system, including gender and race-specific challenges faced by incarcerated women. Their commitment to mental health, education, and rehabilitation programs has opened new doors for meaningful change, benefiting not just individuals, but entire communities. Despite these remarkable contributions, challenges continue to persist. Women in corrections leadership face barriers that range from underrepresentation to biases that question their expertise. And yes, mine was questioned when serving in the role. And so it was a challenging time to be able to lead under those circumstances. These challenges demand collective action, not just to overcome them, but to dismantle them entirely. Through our work in the association, we aim to create pathways that not only support women, but ensure that their leadership has an ability to thrive. So as we move forward in this discussion this evening, I encourage each of us to consider our role in supporting and amplifying the impact of women leaders in corrections, whether it be through collaboration, whether it be through mentorship or advocacy. As I've mentioned, we all play a part in shaping a system that reflects the values of equity and progress. Currently, across the nation, there are 20 women leading state correctional systems across this country, and that signifies that we've come a long way. But it also signifies that we yet have a long way to go. But I am definitely encouraged by the opportunities and the possibilities of what these thoughtful leaders are doing to drive positive change within their system. And I know many or most of all of them who are sitting in those roles, and I am definitely encouraged and honored that they have an opportunity to lead these correctional systems. So in closing, I just want to leave you with this. I want to emphasize this important point. Leadership is not just about making decisions or setting directions. It's about paving the way for others to thrive. In my career, I've been given amazing opportunities, and corrections was never on my radar. But for whatever role that I've served in, I've always believed that it is incumbent on me to not just be the first, but leave the door open for someone else. And for those who have heard me speak before, they will say I always use this analogy that, you know, when the elevator is sent up for you, and to use myself as an example, but when the elevator was sent up for me, I tried to make sure that I always sent it back down to give someone else an opportunity. So for each and every one of us, when that elevator is sent up for you, make sure that you push the button to go down to send someone else up. And women in corrections are not only paving the way, they are reimagining what that road looks like entirely, creating pathways that lead to a more just and humane system. And as president of the Association of Women Executives in Corrections, I am proud to contribute to this vision, to contribute to this discussion this evening. And I invite you all to join me in celebrating and supporting the extraordinary women who we're going to hear from this evening, but also the women who continue to do the work to drive this meaningful change. So thank you to Boston University for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this discussion. And I look forward to being a part of the continuing discussion. So thank you all this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really inspiring words. So we're so glad to hear from you. And I think we'll start with letting our panelists reflect on some of what Pelicia told us, you know, leadership in women and inspiring change and having a lasting impact. I mean, why do we need women in corrections? Dr. Mastrorilli, I'll start with you. You're first, sorry. And what are those two qualities that you would say, or two goals that you would say are needed and that women could specifically focus on when dealing with folks who are incarcerated in the system?
I think we need women in the field because women think a little bit differently than men, in the sense that I think we can be more prone to listen, to be compassionate, to de-escalate, and we just bring a different, I think, mindset to a very, very male field. And I think that gets people thinking in innovative and creative ways that are beneficial to the system.
Yeah. And I will say, if any of you want to add your thoughts, let's make this very conversational. Feel free to do it without me having to call on you. But if you would like to add something, does anybody want to say something about why women in corrections? Why are they a necessary voice?
I can add a little bit to what Mary Ellen said.
Yep.
I think everything that Mary Ellen said is right on point. But I'd also like to add that, corrections is a unique institution. It's a closed environment, different rules, regulations, mores, and there's a hierarchy. It's paramilitary. And as Mary Ellen alluded to, it can be a hyper-masculine environment, which is challenging for women. And I think, as Mary Ellen alluded to, oftentimes when there's conflict, whether it's a resident versus a staff person or what have you, sometimes, and not to gender stereotype, but sometimes, oftentimes the men will need to have a winner and a loser in a situation, whereas women tend to be more collaborative and let's figure out a solution so everybody wins. If it's a resident and he's in a situation, he's trying to save face because his reputation is at stake and the officer is challenging him, I think we get it. We get where they're coming from, and we're not necessarily in a position we don't have the brawn, we don't have the muscle to rely on, we don't have that. We have our minds and our communication skills. So in terms of de-escalating, I think we're very used to that. Some of us are parents. I have 4 children. I have a lot of practice in that, 3 girls. Yeah, I think that we're just wired a bit differently in general. And again, I think the big difference when I've been thinking about this is conflict resolution. We approach it very, very differently. And it's a very important skill to have behind the wall.
One thing that was interesting to me that we heard from Pelicia, well, many things, but one thing she said, corrections was never on her radar. Now, we have a lot of students here tonight, so they're wondering, how did it get on your radar, right? You've all had very esteemed careers in this, but how, was it on your radar? And maybe we'll start with you, Jen, because we didn't get to hear from you yet.
I was a criminal justice major in college, and like many people when they got out of college, felt a little lost. I was not done being with my friends. Had no idea which direction I wanted to go in. And I happened to go to the local, I don't even know what it's called now, but you go and you look for jobs. It's in the old days, there was no computers or anything. So you would go to a facility and look for jobs. And it just sounded like everything that I wanted. It was, my first job was called a correction counselor. And I loved the idea of being in a facility and working with offenders and trying to make a change. And that's what I did every day. You try to make a change. You try to make an impact. Even if it's small, you make an impact. So that's how I got into corrections and never looked back and had a wonderful career and loved every minute of it.
Dr. Bonner, how did you get into all of this?
So I answered an ad in the Boston Globe.
Before computers.
The old days.
It was around 1990, I think, and it brought me to a position at a psychiatric hospital. And I thought that I was going to stay in that position. I was successfully being promoted. But I decided to go back to school because of a mentor, which we'll get into, I think, through another question, and did an internship in a courthouse. And it changed the whole trajectory of my life that I had mapped out pretty well because I liked the interface between people involved in the criminal justice system and those who had mental health issues. I found it very interesting and a huge need area for people who had a clinical background to merge into the criminal justice system.
Because Charlene brought up the Boston Globe, I have to tell you this story. When I was in college, I worked part-time for the Boston Globe, and I graduated with an undergraduate degree in sociology. What the hell do you do with that? And so people were telling me, well, since you're already working for the Boston Globe, just look for job openings that will get you full-time employment, because I had a part-time job when I was a student. So a full-time position opened up, I put in for it, and I got it. I was the Globe's first female janitor. But the idea was just get your foot in the door. And I will tell you that I lasted 9 months. What drove me out was sexual harassment. Mm-hmm. My supervisor found ways to come up close to my body and touch me, and I just couldn't deal with it, and I ended up quitting. I mean, this was 1980. In those days, I don't even know if Anita Hill was born yet, but sexual harassment, there wasn't such a thing as sexual harassment. But my mentor, who I will say was my brother was a police officer. He worked for the MBTA, and now it's called Mass Transit Police. He said, why don't you become a police officer? I said, oh, gee, I'm not interested in that work. But I didn't have any clear pathway. So I started taking exams for police, for corrections, some federal exams, took the corrections exam, passed it, and went to MCI Walpole, which was eventually changed to MCI Cedar Junction, went there for an interview and basically got hired on the spot. And like what Jen said, I never looked back. I found it to be, for the most part, a very rewarding career.
Carole.
So I had a little bit of a different pathway. I grew up in Beverly, Mass. I don't know if anybody see it from the North Shore. Great. So Beverly's right next to Salem. I grew up in Beverly. There we go. So the old Salem jail, I'm sure you're familiar with it. When I was in high school in the 80s, I used to go by the old Salem jail. It was one of the oldest jails in the country. It was built, I think, in 1811. And I was fascinated. I'd see like men hanging out through the bars, kind of yelling, and I was just fascinated with this concept. Like, who are these people and why are they here? What's going on with them? And it was so mysterious, which was, intentional when they designed prisons and jails. It was supposed to be foreboding and mysterious, and it worked. So it got my curiosity. And like Charlene, I had a contact in the courts. The court psychiatrist, you might know the court psychiatrist, June, and he let me do an internship with him when I was in high school. And he went and did evaluations in the Salem jail, psych evaluations. And I was absolutely fascinated by it and understanding how and why. And I think what was really interesting, and I think what was a real gift, I didn't realize it at the time, but this was the old style corrections, right? It was the smells, the sounds. It wasn't a sanitary, climate-controlled facility like we have a lot now. And it was very impactful for me. As a matter of fact, one of the units I worked on still did not have plumbing, and this was in the 80s. The men defecated and urinated in buckets, and they were on tiers. And when they were angry, they just dump it over, and the new books on the lower tier would just, Merry Christmas. So that's how I started. I was hooked, and then I did an internship in college. I was a CJ major. I knew I wanted to go down this road. I did an internship in college at the Lawrence Jail, which is gone now. That was built, I think, in 1860, another very old jail. So I really had the sensory introduction of what it was all about, and I was always on alert and super vigilant because I could see, hear, smell, everything. It was very different. And then for the younger generation here, as everybody alluded to, the term was called pound the pavement. And we used something called a yellow page book. And that's how we got jobs. We would go out, we'd go to places, look them up in the yellow pages and say, this is where I want to work. I had my sights set on county corrections in Boston and Suffolk County Jail and House of Correction, because Suffolk is the most dense county in Massachusetts. I figured that's where all the action was, and it was in Boston. It was not too far from my home, and I just relentlessly needled the HR director to let me in. And then finally one day she said, well, we're doing interviews, but you probably won't get the job, but at least we'll give you some interview experience.
Maybe you'll leave us alone.
Yeah, exactly. And then I didn't get the job, but I got a call back from somebody who said, hey, kid, you did a great job. You're not going to get the casework job. However, there's a job nobody wants. We've had it posted for 2 years, and I'll give it to you. You'll get paid the same as a caseworker. You'll be in a union. It'll be great. So I was like, what is it? And, he said it was doing HIV counseling and testing. This is in the early 90s.
Wow.
And suicide prevention.
Wow.
2 topics I knew nothing about, 2 topics that terrified me. Best gift ever. And it sent me on a separate path from everybody else, because I became a subject matter expert in both of those areas. And it provided me with a lot of opportunities, a lot of growth opportunities. So I always tell my students, keep your eyes on the prize, but take advantage of opportunities when they're presented to you. They might not be exactly what you want or what you envisioned, but if it's going to get your foot in the door, just give it a shot.
So we're talking about entering at a time of sexual harassment, right? A lot of difficulty. Criminal justice reform wasn't even on the radar at all. Probably not a lot of sympathy for people who were incarcerated or anything like that. So how do you go from starting to leadership roles? So what do you think was the biggest thing that helped you get a leadership position? And when you look back, I know there are probably a lot of different factors, right, that contribute to someone eventually becoming a leader in any industry. But when you look back, what do you think it was, and what are you really proud of when you think about leading in this system? What would you say, Jen?
So getting to a leadership position was not easy in my particular case. I came in at a time where my position was a civil service position, but they were not giving civil service tests. So I came in as a temporary hire in that particular position. And you had to be on the civil service list to get a promotion, but yet they weren't giving tests. So I couldn't get a promotion. So I stayed in an entry-level position for 8 years before somebody finally gave me an opportunity to basically become a manager. So I went from that entry-level position that I had done for 8 years because of the lack of civil service tests, finally to a management position. And I think that to get to the level that I got to with deputy commissioner, it took hard work. It took proving myself. Carole talked about becoming an subject matter expert. Becoming experts in different areas of corrections, it takes a while, and it takes some perseverance to get to those places where you are an expert. And I had the opportunity to work on both sides of corrections. I came in on the social service side, but I also ended up working in the security side. I got to the place where I was the head of the policy development and compliance unit. So I wrote policy and did security and operations audits at all the facilities, to include jails. That's how I met Carole at first. So I became subject matter expert on what I started out as with classification. Then I became an expert with policy, and then I learned security by doing security and operations audits. So I had that unique position where I kind of went on both sides. I was asked to become the assistant deputy commissioner over the prisons. So I, coming in as the social work, got to be the head of prisons, which was kind of cool. And I think that getting to those positions, it's just finding people that believe in what you do, and they believed in what I did. And nothing that we do is rocket science. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not rocket science. It's just being good learners. And I learned, and I worked hard at learning, and I wasn't afraid to ask questions, and I was vulnerable, and I wasn't afraid to say, I don't know, let me ask. And I asked people that worked for me because I didn't know all the answers. And I think that people just believed in me, and it just takes that one person that thinks of you that says, Jen Gaffney might be good for that position. And that's what happened. And that's kind of how I made my way up. And, you know, I also wasn't afraid. And I think maybe my last position that I got, I actually said, I'm interested. The others, people just kind of believed in what I did and just asked me, and I just learned.
Wow. Dr. Bonner, what about you, going from, you know, being fascinated by some of the mental health issues that you were seeing, and then now being a member of the parole board and really deciding what happens to folks when they're paroled?
You know, similar to Mary Ellen, I think it was a willingness to just get your foot in the door by doing anything. And working in the trenches, cultivating relationships along the way, being the very best you can be, better than the person beside you, doing what you're doing at the moment. And I don't think anything can replace establishing healthy networks with people and relationships. Part of my journey, some of it was timing, but most of it was having mentors and developing those relationships along the way, where people would reach out, similar to Jen. At some point in my career, people were reaching out to me saying, you know, you might be good at this. Why don't you apply? And that sort of launched me into the position that I'm in now. Don't burn bridges. Just be,
Oh boy, if she say that louder, don't burn bridges. Like, relationships are huge. Yeah.
And women are good at relationships, generally. Yeah. The other thing that I would like to add, if I may, Deb, is the way I thought of it is, how can I differentiate myself from others in order to get the attention of my superiors? And when you're a correction officer, there are a couple of things that you can do that are quite simple. Wear your uniform with pride. You know, iron your clothes, iron your uniform, shine your shoes, show up on time, don't call in sick, write a good report, volunteer for things. I volunteered. I tried out for the TAC team at MCI Cedar Junction and made it.
What's the TAC team?
The tactical team is the team that goes in response to disturbances, and it was mostly male. There were maybe 2 or 3 women on the Department of Correction tactical team, but we would respond to any disturbances and riots and special operations. And one time, if I can share one war story that I love, is we would have monthly training drills, and my captain said, Master Ellie, put on the bite suit, because we had canines as part of the tactical team. So I said, okay, sir. So I put on the bite suit. He told me to stand in the middle of the field. He says, put your arm out like that. I did. And then the canine officer released the German Shepherd, who came charging at me. And I put my arm out. He grabbed onto me, and then he was called off. But, you know, volunteering for things like that can really set you apart. And
White suit worked, right?
And yes, my arm was bruised. And the other thing is also, and it's important for most of you here, if you're a student, pursue education. I decided, and I think like many of us on this panel, I decided to get a master's degree, and that was another way to differentiate myself. So all of those things, I think, can help get you primed for leadership and get the attention of your superiors.
One of the points that Mary Ellen made, I always used to tell people that work for me, you know, just for the job that you want, not the job that you have.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Carole?
I think they all did a great job. but I think that
Leadership in a male-dominated field, it's still male-dominated, right? It's less
I have
than
to say, like,
40%.
I don't want to be negative, but I have to say, Marilyn, when I was listening to your story and the bite suit situation, did you volunteer to put on the bite suit, or were you voluntold to put on?
I was told to.
Okay.
But I did volunteer for the tactical team.
So, but Mary Ellen, you're the one who's going to put on the bite suit. That's scary. I've been in positions like that when they come in. And sometimes I think in positions like that, you're being put to the test because you're the woman.
right.
How's she going to respond to this? And sometimes I would wonder if some of them are secretly hoping that you would get bitten.
Right.
Or that you'd run out crying.
Right.
So I think that the elephant in the room would be like, there are things like that happen, and there are sometimes people that don't want you there because you're a woman and want to see you fail.
What about current challenges? I can just speak from journalism, right? A lot of young people say, oh, I want to get into journalism. And when I say work hard, develop relationships, prove yourself, they look at me like that's a quaint idea sometimes, right? And certainly there were challenges in my industry as well, for women especially. But I wonder, which ones do you think still persist? And what advice do you give to young women about those challenges and how to work with them? What would you say to that?
I think that, we talked about women being in corrections and the difference between men and women. And I think that there are times where we're criticized because we might be softer. Mm-hmm. I was in a position with some challenging superiors that criticized me because I was too soft. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't too soft. I just didn't have to scream and yell to get people to respond to what I wanted. I had no problem holding people accountable. I have had to fire people and felt okay about it because it's what they deserved. But I think being criticized for being soft is a challenge because, don't mistake my niceness for my abilities to get the job done. I might have a different way than you. You might have to scream and yell. I don't. And that I went through some criticism for that. I'm proud of remaining who I was and getting the job done, being nice and, talking to people and telling people where they were falling short and where they needed to do better. But that's a criticism that I think women face just because we're women and we don't scream and yell.
Anybody else want to answer that question?
I just want to say, because it works perfectly with my notes here, Jen, I wrote on my notes here the definition of strong. Mm-hmm. Jen clearly was strong in her role, but in corrections, strong is often perceived as being, loud and brash and tough and characteristics like that. Especially when you're a correction officer and you're working in a cell block and you're outnumbered 50-1 or 100-1, you are not going to depend on your muscle and your strength. You need to be able to think quickly on your feet. You need to be able to de-escalate. You need to be able to have good communication skills. So I think the way strength is being defined or has been defined in corrections is all wrong. We need to go back and refine it.
Dr. Bonner, what would you say about current challenges for women, and how would you describe those and compared to when you started?
Some of what I'd like to say would be career suicide. So I think I won't.
Oh, okay.
But I'll share what I can. Some of the challenges I think for women who are parents, there's an inherent sort of concern if you're have childcare needs or you need to ask for maternity leave. I adopted my child, and I can remember being really concerned would I receive the same benefits as my counterparts just because I didn't give birth to my child, and my child was not in need of me to be there to breastfeed or other things that obviously biological children need. So, I was concerned about that. I think it's tough in general to advocate for yourself in a male-dominated profession, and I still find that to be challenging today. Some of that may be, more my own personal traits, but I think it's probably more commonplace for women in general in a male-dominated field.
Carole, what would you say?
Just to add to that, yes, I agree with everything that Charlene said, and we need to stick together. We're in the minority, and what I've found is we support each other. We're not competitive with one another, which is wonderful. But back to the current challenges, not too long ago, we had somebody who was coming back from maternity leave, and she needed a room to pump her milk in, and so I was charged with finding that room, and I found a couple great spaces. And I was told, absolutely not. That's good for storage. She can pump in the bathroom. And I was like, no, she can't. And so it's like, yes, she can. She can go in the bathroom. Like, I'm not even like, how do you break that down? Where do you begin? And sometimes it's just people not understanding the other gender or the needs. But, to Charlene's point, I was terrified every time I had to tell them I was pregnant 4 times. Terrified, that, oh my gosh, another maternity leave. And my maternity leaves were shorter and shorter and shorter because I was terrified that I was going to lose my job.
Huh. It's a culture shift, it strikes me, right? Like you came in and things were changing. And I think I read, 38% of women, 38% of those who work in corrections are women, right? So it's not a lot, right? And I think it's daunting, right, for women to think of this. So I guess what's the advice, or do you have a story that illustrates this of what happened to you of you're like warriors in a culture change, as well as dealing with a lot of really heavy things in your jobs. So that's a big thing to work with, right? And how do you keep yourself, right? Keep true to yourself and still sort of address some of these things that are going on in a culture that may not always be so nice to you.
Corrections is tough too, because there's a lot of complacency and a lot of time for correction officers to think about things. And being a woman inside correctional facilities, it's all men. You're around men all the time. So if you're with a friend who's a man, you're automatically sleeping with them. I have slept with so many people, like it's crazy, and I haven't. It's just, you can't even have a friend. So you have to really be true to who you are. And, like Carole said, we support one another. If you're going to be one of those women that's trying to stand on somebody else's head to get where you want to be, this is not it. We need to champion each other, and we need to be there for one another because it's hard. It's worth it. It's the greatest job I ever had. I went and I spent 33 years doing it. So, I have some of my best friends that I made in this job, both male and female. I met my husband there. Maybe he's the one person I didn't sleep with. But he understands too. But, he knows that the men inside are dogs too. So there was always his eye was, on me. So some of the things, it's hard and you can't win, but you just have to be true to yourself.
Right. Advice to folks about how to sort of do that and navigate that, and what's the biggest, maybe a good piece of advice that you got from a mentor of how you do that?
Yeah. I think that you can't have thin skin, you know, and that's hard. I'm sensitive. I am. And, you know, sometimes my husband will say now, you know, stop being so sensitive. I'm like, I spent 33 years having to have up a shield. I'm sensitive, you know, you can't have skin that's so thin that you're going to react to, you know, she's too soft, or, you know, look at who she's with now, or, you know, you just can't. And if you can't override that, you're going to have a real challenge. You can't react.
And I'd like to add on to that. We make a good team, Jen. Yeah, every time you say something, I want to pile it on. I was demoted twice in my career, and I didn't allow those demotions to be mortal wounds. They were more like battle scars. And I ended up being demoted from basically a superintendent's position, and I went back down to correction officer. I was offered a mid-level position, mid-level manager position, and I said, no, I do not trust you people. I feel I need union protection. Put me back at my original institution, which was MCI Cedar Junction, and I went back from being a administrator where I had a take-home vehicle to being a correction officer with Tuesday, Wednesdays off. And I went back into that job, and I was the very best correction officer that I could be. And I did that for 2 years until I was recruited away to another facility, the Norfolk County Sheriff's Department. And I suppose I could have taken on an attitude and have called in sick all the time, but I was the very best correction officer that I could be. And the day that I left MCI Cedar Junction, which was my second time there, because that's where I had started out, the superintendent called me in his office and said, I wish I had 100 more officers like you. And that absolutely shocked me, because I was working the pedestrian trap frequently at Cedar Junction, and that's where you clear visitors and staff for entry. And I was working there a lot, and he would come through, wouldn't even say good morning to me, but on the day I left, he said, I wish I had 100 more like you. So I think the point is, you know, being thick-skinned means you don't take those mortal wounds. They become battle scars. And the guy that recruited me away from the Massachusetts Department of Correction, I said to him, you don't want me. I've been demoted twice. I've got baggage. He said, no, you've got a badge of honor. And he says, it doesn't matter if you're demoted. What matters is how you respond to that. Now, I just want to say in my defense, I was demoted for bullshit reasons. But anyway, but still, it's how you respond to adverse circumstances. People notice.
Right. I wonder, because you've worked in the system for so long, and, you know, Carole, you were describing what it was like in some of the really old facilities, right? But now we know we've closed prisons in Massachusetts, right? The number of people incarcerated has gone down by maybe 50%, I think, over that time frame. We've got about 6,000 people incarcerated in the Department of Correction right now. So big changes, a lot of mental health and substance use issues. So that are required to be dealt with now. What do you think? And feel free to weigh in. What are some of the big changes that you're almost surprised to have witnessed during your time? What would you say?
I'd like to share that, you know, when I started, those of you who might be criminal justice majors have probably learned that, you know, the pendulum swings from one end to the other, conservative to liberal, back and forth. And, you know, when I started my career, it was great. Everybody was getting college education behind the wall, lots of programs. It was just a very different climate. And then the crime bill came in 1994, and that changed everything like that. You know, like that, no more education, like that. Well, BU probably still continued, right? But everything else was gone. And the whole tone changed. It was almost like people had contempt for each other and for the residents, and it just was difficult. And so because, we're OGs, we have stayed around and we've seen the pendulum start to swing back with more restorative programs, rehabilitative programs. And it's been wonderful to see that, to see people getting their needs met. However, I fear that the pendulum's going back again right now. And I think that what we haven't really talked about yet are the people inside prisons and jails. We talked a lot about the dynamics of us staying well and managing ourselves, because I think we'd all agree that the hard part is that, what we've been talking about, not the people who are in the prisons and jails.
Why not?
Corrections is a microcosm of our society. And it basically is symbolic of broken systems. When systems break down and people fall through the cracks, that's where they come. There's a lot of issues, as we mentioned earlier, about dual diagnosis, undiagnosed mental illness. And what I say a lot is, hurt people hurt people. And I think that there really needs to be a voice for people who are behind the wall, who are going to help them get on track and build their skills and build their resiliency. We talked about not being reactionary, and we talked about, battle wounds and building our resiliency. I think those are the two things that we really need to help the residents with, is becoming more resilient while they try to choose a better pathway, and also to not be so reactionary. That gets us all in trouble, right? When we're reactionary. So I think that it's really important to remember why we're there and who we're serving and what our role is. And I don't think there's anything more rewarding than having a profound impact, positive impact in somebody's life, and hopefully changing the trajectory of their life and their circumstances.
I want to remind folks that you can ask questions on Slido or raise your hand, because I think we're going to run out of time quickly. I'm looking at the time already thinking, how did it get this late? But I think a lot of folks might say, to your point, women in corrections, weren't you afraid, right? They put people who are incarcerated in a box to be afraid of. They're other, right? They may not be as concerned about their well-being sometimes. And you're right. You're dealing with people, right? And how do you sort of deal with that attitude and try to change people's minds that these are people, part of our society too, and my work with them is helpful to try to make sure that they are rehabilitated and can go on and function well?
I think that what we do as correctional professionals with our residents is not championed enough. It's always criticized. Mm-hmm. We never do enough for them. Mm-hmm. I think that people, whether it's advocates, media, whomever family, whomever it is, they don't realize how much actually is happening for our incarcerated individuals. We talk about the change from when I came in to when I left, preparing them for a, transition back into the community so that they're successful. We want them to be successful. They're going to be somebody's neighbor. We don't want them to be dangerous. So we work on, practically from day one when they come in to prepare them to release. I think that what we should be doing as well is having more community partners to help them, transition as well. We can have doctor's appointments set up, we can have counseling appointments set up, we can have their medication ready, we can give them a degree, but if they don't have a car to get someplace, if they live, in rural communities, they can't get there. Or, I don't know if any of you, but I've had all kinds of challenges with, medical insurance, or, you know, trying to find mental health counselors, you know, for my family, whatever it is. These people don't have the support and the abilities that I have. We need champions for them on the outside to help them navigate through all of those areas that they just can't, they're constantly starting from behind. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I want to see more efforts to work with us for when they do get out, you know, to help them. They need help.
Dr. Bonner, you have to make decisions about, you're a member of the board that makes decisions about when people might be ready to get out or to step down and make their way out. Mm-hmm. What sort of a guiding principle do you use to make that determination?
Well, the population has certainly changed since I entered the board in 2011, and as you were stating, the incarceration rate has gone down. So the pool of people that we're evaluating for release now is very different, and they're much more challenging and much more complex. My dissertation was in deinstitutionalization, and the prison population went up 400% as a result of deinstitutionalization. And I feel like that's where we are right now, that there's a significant amount of people with mental health issues and coexisting substance abuse issues. So the needs and the risks of the population we're evaluating now are incredibly challenging. How we do that, I mean, there's a number of different measures that we look at more objectively, but from just a perspective of humanity, there's nothing worse than to see someone who has had nothing but trauma, systemic failures throughout their entire life, and you want to help them, but we're in public safety, and you're balancing your compassion with public safety. And to Jen's point, if the resources aren't available to safely transition somebody, they're stuck, right. And we're stuck.
And you have to, corrections has to take them.
And
it's not like you can say, we don't have an appointment, we don't serve you. You have to take these folks. So is what we're seeing a real breakdown in the mental health system in a lot of ways?
100%. I mean, the jails and prisons are the mental health system now. And the lack of transitional housing and you know, accessibility to programs doesn't match the need. People are fighting, 100 people are fighting for one bed. And that's not unheard of. So, you know, it's a societal problem because 90% of these people are getting out. And whether they're on parole or not, they're going to be your neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody want to add to that before we go on? Any questions? Questions? No questions on Slido? Anybody have a question in the room? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see it.
Yeah, I'm formerly incarcerated. We'll start off with that. I have a question. Right now, I'm the director of the Freedom Library Project at the Prison Book Program down in Quincy, and I send books to prisoners, always with the thought of what Malcolm X said, that people don't realize that a person's whole life can be changed by just one book. You know, and I try to send books like Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and which leads to my question. None of us can do anything about our past. You know, we can't change it or alter it, you know, and then we can learn from it, but that's about it. And the future isn't guaranteed to anybody. So what's your view of prisoners being provided opportunities to do something meaningful today, right where they are right now? Because if you're going to live a meaningful life, a life of purpose and meaning, it has to be done today. And I'm talking about sometime in the future or anything. It's now, when I send books to prisoners, I try to send books like Viktor Frankl's book, and I can name a whole bunch of others. But do it with the intention that the recipient reads the book and passes it to another prisoner. That may violate some prison rules right there, but you know, they have agency in that process. And that person reads it and passes it on. The first book I sent in wound up having 12 people on the list to read it. That book was Hard Class by Chris Hedges. You know, it's about he teaches in a men's maximum security prison in New Jersey, and the book was about that class. You know, and the idea of sending it was, you know, maybe somebody would get the idea to sign up for a college program, you know, and like the one here and the one in Dallas. But you know, what's your view on that, providing opportunities for prisoners to have agency and doing something meaningful right now, right where they are?
I mean, I know of a lot of prisoners that do that already. You know, there's all kinds of different civic groups that they get together. They'll do, you know, the Boston Marathon, and they'll raise money and they'll give it to causes. So there are things that they do. And I think that there's no better time when they have all this time for them to do wonderful things. You know, they raise puppies to become service dogs in our facilities. And if you've ever seen, you know, a service dog come back and see the inmate that raised him, it will bring you to your knees in tears, because the dog remembers, you know, being raised by that person. So there's lots of opportunities. I think sky is the limit, and I think that if you have any ideas, I know that the department would be willing to work with you to do those things, because I think it's a great idea. I think that, you know, providing purpose for these men, where a lot of them have never felt purpose or never felt accomplished or never felt that they finished anything, it's life-changing. So I think if you have ideas, I'm all for it. Not that I have any control anymore, but I know the people that do, and I know that they'd be all for it.
I have lots of ideas.
Well, there you go.
Good. I do have some questions on Slido. I had to update. Here's a question. How much is being done in terms of recruiting and retaining women in corrections? Is staffing down overall? Who would like to ask? Carole, do you know the answer to that?
Oh, I don't want to touch that. That's a $50,000 question. Yeah, yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. Yeah, staffing's down. It's a challenge, and it's always been a challenge, you know, because I'm not going to get into it.
There's always recruiting, though.
There's always recruiting.
I know that speaking for the Department of Correction, there's a whole recruiting department, and they have recruiting events all the time. You see stuff posted on LinkedIn, on Facebook. They have things in Milford. They go out to schools. There's always recruitment. Is it, you know, women specific? You know, they have had different campaigns, you know, to recruit women, but recruitment is constant. Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is for some is civil service presents a lot of challenges in hiring practices, because some jobs are directly wedded to the civil service exam in order to qualify for certain positions. So I know in parole we've seen some reform measures with the civil service hiring practices.
Is it still possible for someone to start as a correction officer and make their way up into a leadership position with continuing education and other? It's still possible, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Just making sure. Another question. With the constantly changing political environment, talk about not wanting to touch a question. How do you balance the wants of leadership with the needs of those in the prison system?
I think that's very challenging, but I think that, you know, Jen mentioned something a minute ago about opening up the doors more and being more open and responsive to community-based agencies and academic institutions who can provide services and education for the residents. I think that's really the key. In my roles throughout my career, I always learned the whole phrase, how to do more with less. I learned how to do more with nothing. We had zero funding for programming. So I think that the secret sauce is to really, there's so many people in the community that want to help and want to be involved, and there's so many great opportunities. And I think correctional facilities, both state and county, are now realizing all the resources that they've turned away in the past, that they're much more receptive to now. Because as somebody said, there's almost 2 million people incarcerated in our country, and whether we like it or not, 98% will be coming back to our neighborhoods. So as community members, we need to ask ourselves, who do we want returning to our neighborhoods? How do we want to make sure we have safe neighborhoods and give people the opportunities to survive? And something you had said a minute ago, I'd just like to touch on, and there are some great forward-thinking, progressive programs, places. Maine Department of Corrections is one that comes to mind. They try to normalize things as much as possible, rehumanize the population. It starts with the language, and they offer fair-paying wage positions. There's somebody there right now that through our program, we taught him how to code. We do coding programs. And he got a job, still incarcerated, got a job with Unlock Labs. And he's making close to 6 figures, if not. Wow. And, that's wonderful, because that's going to go in an escrow account. It's going to pay his court costs, his fines, if he has child support or whatever it might be. All of that will be taken care of, and when he gets out, he will have money for deposit, for housing, and be able to get on his feet. So a lot of places are doing things with regard to education. They're allowing laptops, they're allowing internet access, and they are providing opportunities for employment that interests the people, that they can start behind the wall and transition as they re-enter society and maintain their employment.
And I just want to add very quickly that when I started out in corrections in 1980, there were a number of pre-release centers for men and women, minimum security pre-release centers where you would be transferred there. Usually it would be within 18 months of your parole eligibility, and you would go out and you'd get a job. And they were almost self-sustaining in the sense that you'd turn in your paycheck once a week, and you'd put a third in your savings account, a third towards room and board, and a third in your pocket. And what I saw happen in Massachusetts, and this is the pendulum swinging, we started to close our pre-release centers and build maximum security prisons. 95 or 98% of the men and women are getting out. It's best that we ease that transition through the use of pre-release centers. And I just want to add to that, evidence-based policies and programming. The research that was done at the time showed pre-release centers were very effective in reducing recidivism rates. Rather than letting a man get released from maximum security, if you can release that man or woman from a pre-release, they're probably going to be a lot more successful in the community.
As well as furloughs,
Yes,
which used to happen, and as a result
Not doing
of
that anymore.
Mike Dukakis
We weren't allowed to
and
use
Willie
that word.
Horton and
Furloughs, the F word, we weren't allowed to use that, Charlene.
best way to reintegrate.
To Charlene's earlier point, with the population cut in half, and now we're housing serious offenders, serious mental health issues. So pre-releases are not as full because the pool is not there the way it used to be. Right. And you hear a lot, the population is half of what it was, but the budget is twice.
Right.
It's because we're dealing with really difficult people. We have to meet benchmarks that we'd never had to meet. And it's just harder with the people that are left.
What's an example of a benchmark?
Well, just criminal justice reform, even, restrictive housing and, now we create units instead of restrictive housing that require a lot more staff. It's more staff intensive. These people still need to be restricted because they're dangerous, but we can't just put them in a room anymore. So they're out in this unit, but the staff that are there to pay attention. So I guess benchmark may not have been the right word, but there are these new incentives and programs that we want to do because it's the right thing to do for these men, but they're very costly.
Right. We have time, I think, for one more question. Now we've got a bunch, sorry. How can we shift public perception around incarcerated women and women leading reforms? About 10% of the incarcerated population is women, I think. At least that's what I remember. So how do you shift that perception of women and women leading reforms? Yeah.
I mean, I assume that you mean public perception of these women.
I would guess that.
Yeah, I mean,
Opportunities.
Yeah.
Just, people need opportunities in the community to work, to be educated, to have services. A lot of the decision making is driven by fear, especially now, given the political climate and threats of defunding unless you fall in line. See, I'm about to go rogue, so I got to stop myself. People are afraid. They're afraid. The immigrant population is afraid. We need to fight back. We need to fight really hard because the threats of using the purse to keep people in line is very, very real. And some of what we can do is to supplement with more volunteer services if things get taken away. But this is a very critical time, I think, in corrections and in society, and the fear is very real. And we have to empower each other and fight really hard.
I think that, some of our incarcerated women, too, there's a very high percentage of them that have been sexually abused themselves. So, the way that we work with them with, restorative programs and, before COVID hit, we had this company that I don't know if they're bringing in, but they were coming in to remove tattoos. You make silly decisions when you're young. You have tattoos on your neck and your hands. And we had this company that would kind of come in and remove tattoos free of charge for anybody that wanted to do it. So I think working with the women inside to, help them present themselves better, work on, their trauma. We have a lot of trauma-informed care. So it's just helping them present themselves better and giving them the opportunity to do that. The public is the public. Everybody's a critic. So it's just, we can only try to help them be prepared.
I would like to try to end on a happy note. I know I said that was the last question, but we do have a good question, and this might be a little bit more optimistic. If there was one thing you could fix or change, what would it be? Maybe each of you could sort of answer that. What's the one thing that you would like to see? Maybe you started it and you'd like to see it finished or improved. What would it be?
I have to put a plug in for the Boston University Prison Education Program. I would love to see more college, post-secondary education in every single prison. I would love to see maybe a prison that is just completely devoted to education. And in the absence of that, then, housing units that are dedicated to education. So I think education is key, and I think the research backs that up in terms of lowering recidivism.
100% it does. I think that I would like to see greater collaboration between the department and entities on the outside versus constantly hammering the Department of Correction, work together with them to create a better transition for people. That's what I would like to see.
Probably funding for skilled therapeutic services and specialized training for officers so that they can respond to this population differently.
Carole.
Okay.
Last word.
I'll take it larger. I think that we need to look at what we're doing in this country. Many of you probably are aware that we incarcerate more people than most other countries, just about any other country. And, we have, was it a quarter of the population is incarcerated, world population is incarcerated here. And we need to look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. And now's the time for change. And I think we should look to what other people are doing and doing well, like prisons over in Europe. Halden Prison in Norway is just the gold standard. Prisons in Germany are amazing too, because people are looking at when people commit an offense, get sent to prison, the sanction is losing their freedom. And that's what the sanction should be here. You lose your freedom. You should not be dehumanized because you committed a crime. We all have basic human rights that I think we should respect. And we have had a dark history in this country of dehumanization and in carceral settings, and it's got to stop because it's very, very damaging. And I think that if we seriously can take some lessons from Europe and try to change our culture and our climate behind the wall, we'll all be better off. So
Very good. Well, thank you very much. They were great. Thank you. We're not quite done yet. Before we have a bit of a reception, we're going to hear from Anna Walsh, who is a current student here at Boston University, and she wants to make some remarks as well. But thanks to our terrific panel. Thank you. Anna, do you want to come up?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. So, before we begin the Q&A session, I want to thank the BU Department of Applied Social Sciences for sponsoring this event and Professor Cronin for organizing. I also want to express my gratitude to everyone for being here today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. But most importantly, I'd like to thank the panelists for sharing your valuable insights and for all the work you've done in correctional reform. This gathering offers a unique opportunity for us to come together and envision meaningful reform in our correctional systems, drawing from the wisdom of these women leaders in corrections who have dedicated their careers to this cause. It is especially important to highlight women's involvement in corrections and reform because despite the fact that more women are entering these fields, I believe their contributions remain overlooked. While women now represent 54% of probation and parole officers nationwide, their presence in higher level executive positions remains low. Even in preparing to speak today, I found very limited research on women's representation and leadership positions within corrections. Speaking from my own experience as a BU student nearing graduation, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on the last 4 years studying criminal justice. While I've learned a lot from my courses, I've also realized that I learned very little about the experiences of women incarcerated in our systems, and even less about women working within them. So personally, I was very excited for today's panel. Being here to discuss women's leadership and impact in correctional reform is a big step in expanding our conversations on the criminal legal system. But I'd also like to refocus our attention on those who couldn't be here with us today. As we discuss this issue, there are currently around 1.8 million American citizens behind bars, a large percentage of whom are Black and brown folks, members of the LGBTQ community, and increasingly women. So clearly something needs to change, or a lot of things. Now more than ever, it's time for innovative, creative solutions with all hands on deck to get the job done on reform. The meaningful impact each of these women has made in correctional leadership highlights the benefit of and need for an open-minded and inclusive environment where all voices, especially new ones, are valued. With that, we warmly invite students interested in criminal justice to join our working group. As current leaders and future leaders in reform, we aim to uncover innovative solutions and identify best practices in corrections. I'm a newer member myself, and I've really enjoyed getting the inside scoop and most recent updates on from people directly working in the field. It's given me valuable insight into what reform looks like on the ground and how to face the often tricky obstacles that arise in such a complex field. But most of all, I appreciate how the group values my insights and those of my fellow students, and always seeks to gather a student perspective on these issues. If you're interested in learning more, please visit our website at correctionalreform.org, or feel free to ask any questions during the networking section of the event, which we can kick off right now.